Okay, good evening. DK with Mr. V Amps here to answer a question I've been wondering. If you notice, this is an SG guitar. It is a Gibson SG guitar. But one of those knobs is silver. That's the control knob for the robotic tuning system. This is a self-tuning guitar. I have several of them. This is the first generation self-tuning guitar from Gibson. The first was called the Robot, and it was actually a Les Paul in a really cool blue finish. Would love to have one of those, but you know, circumstances. But this is an SG, and it's very pretty. The first generation tuning system we'll take a look at in just a second. We'll flip the guitar over, and I'll show you how it works. Actually, let's start on the front. Never mind. Give me just a second. This one can remember up to 8 different tunings that are selectable from the silver knob. And the bridge itself has piezo sensors in each of the saddles. So there's wires that go down from the bridge to the brain of the guitar. And you can actually see the grommet for the stop bar that goes down into the body. Now, this is something that a lot of people probably don't know about these systems. There is no electrical wire directly running up the neck of the guitar. There are no wires hidden in the neck of this guitar. So this is technically retrofittable to a guitar at the time. And Tronical, the company behind it, was manufacturing them. We'll flip it over and we'll talk a little bit more once we get to the other side. Okay, so we're looking at the headstock of the Generation 1 robotic guitar, and the motors on this are substantial. They're a bit large, but they don't weigh very much at all. The gears inside are very, very light, so it doesn't really affect the balance or make the guitar any more awkward than an SG normally is. And we all know that in general they're a little head heavy and awkward because it's an SG. But that said, each of these tuners has a motor in it in which it can adjust up and down to tune the guitar. If you want to tune the guitar on your own, let's say the battery runs dead, you're required to pull the tuner out, disengage the motor to adjust it. As far as turning them on the Generation 1, they turn in the same direction as they would on a normal 3x3 headstock. So how accurate is this system? Let's find out according to our Conn Stroboscope. Today's Conn Stroboscope is the ST8. It's the youngest one I have, and the display is the easiest one I have to read. But the ST6, the other one, is also very, very easy to read. But I have some concerns about the age of the electrolytic capacitors in that one. So we will be doing surgery on that one in the future. This one I'm very comfortable with, as it remains at a very comfortable operating temperature throughout hours of fiddling with guitars. I've actually taken the time to stroboscope a lot of my guitars, and I'm finding how much better I can get the intonation by running them over the stroboscope. So anyway, let's take a look at the SG tuning itself first. Okay, now to operate a first generation guitar, you effectively reach down and pull this knob out, and it will light up. At this point I can actually choose an alternate tuning if I wish, but it's waiting to tune to standard tuning. When I strike each of these strings, it will be listening on the piezo bridge to tune them. So we'll see if there's any kind of interesting action happening up here. We'll try to zoom in. I wish I had a multi-camera split screen setup like some fancy YouTubers do, but this is not a fancy YouTuber channel. Okay, so we will just go down the guitar, starting with the high string to the low string, and allow it to make any adjustments it wants to make. Okay, so in this case it only chose to make a slight adjustment to the A string, the 5th string, and now it is awaiting further command, and it actually mutes when you pull the string out, or the switch out. So if I push it back in, it will go back to unmuted and ready to play. So according to the guitar, it's in tune. Let's see what the stroboscope thinks and see how good the first generation of Gibson tuning is. Okay, the strobo tuner is ready to go, and the guitar's internal system thinks it's tuned. High E. Almost dead on. Low E. Almost dead on, slightly flat. D. Very, very close, but slightly flat. B. Very, very close, but slightly sharp. A. Very, very close, slightly sharp. And G. Very, very close, slightly sharp. So the first generation robot does a pretty good job. This was 2007 technology. In 2000, actually maybe 2006-7. Anyway, in 2007 they announced the release of a guitar called the Darkfire that was supposed to be the second generation guitar with improved tuning that was much faster. Tuning on the first generation robot is admittedly a bit slow. The Darkfire made it late to production, and we didn't really start to see them until 2008. And I just perchance to have one that we can look at. This is the second generation Gibson self-tuning guitar. It was known as the Darkfire. It is a Les Paul style. It has a burst bucker 3, I believe they refer to it as, in the bridge, and a P90 in the neck. This tuning system shares a lot of similarities with the Generation 1, but with a few significant changes. The mechanisms at the top of the headstock have been updated. They run much faster, and all of them spin in the exact same direction. So if you needed to manually tune this, it would confuse you at first. But you shouldn't have to manually tune these. The biggest improvements that they had made were the speed of tuning. That was a huge one. The number of tunings, instead of 8, it now knows 24. And it has oodles of different features, enabled to tune to things other than A440. And also the ability to rewire its pickups. If you want single coils, you could adjust that. If you wanted humbuckers, you can adjust that. If you want them in parallel or in series, or however you wanted to wire them, you could emulate many, many guitar sounds with this. It also came with a fancy computer recording interface. Very, very thoughtful. I don't know that everybody would use all of those things, but just being able to rewire the pickups as whatever you would want them to and emulate many, many sounds was a plus. That and carrying 24 tunings. Okay, now I did not pre-tune this guitar like I did the first generation. The first generation guitar was almost in tune when I started. That's because it tunes slowly. This one tunes much faster. Let's take a quick look at the headstock. And the battery is also housed down in the body like it was in the other. And we'll zoom up here. Take a look. You can see it is an updated mechanism. Now, I did mention there were no wires running through the neck of the guitar on the Generation 1, and there are none on the Generation 2. So how does it get electricity up there to turn the motors? It actually runs low voltage right through your guitar strings. So if you get lazy and don't change your guitar strings, your guitar will just give you the finger and stop tuning. Also, make it a habit to not break strings. That can make it not work too. Okay. Just like the previous system, this one also, you can see there's white insulators here. That's where it injects the electricity into the strings. It is low voltage DC. You're not going to get shocked. And it also has piezos to listen to the different strings, which are activatable by this thing, and you can play your guitar through the piezos for a new sound. Maybe more like an acoustic guitar plugged in. So we'll pull the control knob out and get it ready to tune to standard. Usually when these are stored, they're stored a half a step down to not stress the neck too much with humidity change. Okay, so it appears that it's ready to tune. Let's take a look up here at the headstock and see if we can watch the magic as I go through the strings. That's the weirdest sound. It was like it was in an open tuning for playing slide. I would not have expected that. So that's through one round of tuning. That goes far faster than the first generation. Now let's put it on the stroboscope. We'll give it one more chance to, I'll run the tuning cycle one more time, just because it did go quite a bit from where it was to where it is. And then we'll check and see how it does on the stroboscope. Okay, so our Gibson Darkfire has been through one more tuning cycle just to be sure. Let's take a look. We'll start with E like we did on the other. High E, extremely close. I think a bit closer than our first generation did the first time I checked it, but almost dead on. Very slightly flat. And low E is slightly flat. Now we'll go to D. Very close, slightly flat. I would think logically they would want to favor flat over sharp, because when you fret an instrument like this, you're doing upward bends. B, almost dead on, ever so slightly flat. A, I'm going to get a better read there. Quite close, very slightly flat. G, very close, ever so slightly flat. So, looking at the Darkfire system, it appears that it does favor being slightly flat. Now, this is going to freak out the Strobo tuner. It's going to look like it blacks out. I just gave the Darkfire's tuning system one more shot to tune itself up. Let's see if it made any changes this time. So we ended on the G. Let's look at the G again. That is extremely close, but ever so slightly flat. Back to the E. High E, almost dead on, ever so slightly flat. Low E, almost dead on, ever so slightly flat. D, almost dead on, ever so very slightly flat. B, almost completely dead on, ever so slightly flat. It makes me wonder if I need to double check the calibration on my tuner again. As these things warm up with the vacuum tubes, sometimes they need a little bit of fiddling. The A seems absolutely rock solid dead on at the strike, and then it wanders just a hair flat. This is so close that I would be fussing to adjust it. Let me verify my calibration. It appears that my calibration might be just a hair off now that it's had a chance to warm up. Let me see if I can make that slight adjustment. Let's see if that ever so slight adjustment in the tuner's calibration helps out with the results we have here on our guitar. The A, again, appears almost the same. Let's go check the two E's. I'm going to stick to my original idea that the tuning is extremely close, but it almost intentionally favors being just a little bit flat, which for a fretted instrument would make sense, because every string fretting, per se, can constitute an upward bend if you press on the frets firmly. As far as the difference between the first and second generation, I would say the second generation is a vast improvement. The guitar can change tunings very, very quickly. Just to give you an idea, let's try one. Okay, this is our Darkfire in action here. You can see the headstock and most of the tuner keys. It's about as good as I can do with the potato camera we have. I'm going to give the instruction for 1/2 step flat tuning. Okay, the instruction has been given, and the guitar does not react until I strum the strings. As soon as we do, audibly, that sounds very close. I'm going to ask the guitar to touch itself up one more time. As you know, with significant changes in pitch, you do get a little bit of movement in the neck sometimes that can affect tuning. So it's had one chance to adjust itself. Shall we check its accuracy? Okay, being 1/2 step flat, the high E will now be a D sharp. Extremely close, slightly flat, and the low E should be also a D sharp. Seeing that all of these are coming out just a hair on the flat side makes me want to double check to make sure the guitar itself is calibrated to 440. But boy, does it sound so close when it's tuned. This would be our D, now tuned to C sharp. That is so extremely close to being dead on. Slightly flat. That would be our B, which is now going to be an A sharp. And our A string should be a G sharp. So close. And let's try, I think I forgot our G, which should be an F sharp. Okay, so very similar results with the G2 in standard tuning or 1/2 step down. Tends to favor being just a hair flat. For a guitar, knowing what we know about tuning, that makes sense that it would favor just being a little bit flat, because a lot of us unintentionally make a little bit of an upward bend when we're playing certain strings. Okay. This system came out in about 2008 or 9, but by 2012, 13, 14, there were auto-tuning systems showing up on tons of Gibson guitars, and that was a new system altogether. No more bridges that listen, now the headstocks themselves listen. Welcome to roughly present day. This is a 2015 model Gibson Les Paul Deluxe. It has mini humbuckers in it. They made a number of changes to these guitars to add new features. and some people felt that they took away from the tradition of the Les Paul. So they also issued a version called the Traditional that didn't add some of these things. The first thing they did on their humbucking pickups, they enabled a method to go to single coil by pulling out your volume knob. It's a push-pull volume knob, and that is available on both of the two pickups. Secondarily, instead of two tone knobs, you only get one now. But that little switch will engage almost 15 dB of boost. It has a power boost circuit in there, which makes it much easier to overdrive a mellow amp and get a loud roaring sound, or a very easy way to kick in extra power if you wanted to play a solo. Additionally, this is what I consider to be one of the better improvements, at least coming from a setup adjuster luthier type standard. At the top of the headstock, instead of a traditional plastic or bone or graphite nut, there's that brass thing right there. That's a 0 fret. The bottom of this is actually a fret, and it's adjustable up and down, and these slots are fairly wide to accommodate different gauge strings. In this case, we have a set of 11s on the guitar. Normally, if you were to change strings, you would have to ask a luthier or someone who owns nut saws. I know I can hear Beavis and Butthead laughs in the background here, but has the appropriate tools to adjust the width of your slots. This eliminates that need. You could go from 10s to 12s and back to 10s again if you wanted, and you wouldn't really have to modify the guitar. The adjustment of the height at the first fret is always frustrating for many people. Most guitars coming off the line always seem to be too high. But in this case, instead of having to have a luthier or someone with nut saws adjust that depth for you, you can actually do it yourself with a very small Allen key. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But we weren't here to talk about how cool these guitars are. And again, the traditionalist just blew a gasket over some of these changes. But that's understandable. Sometimes when you try to reinvent the wheel, you make some people unhappy, so they continue to produce a traditional model. The new tuning system, also developed by Tronical, the same people who developed the other two tuning systems, is entirely encapsulated on the headstock of the guitar. The battery is a snap-in battery that can be removed for charging. This one doesn't remember quite as many tunings. I don't think it's 24, I think it's 16. It might be 24. I don't remember because I only use about 4 or 5 of them. But this has the extremely speedy motors that the Generation 2 had. And it listens at the headstock itself, as opposed to listening at the bridge. So this one listens in the same style as a clip-on guitar tuner. That's got some good and some bad. As far as the good, it's very easy to add to a guitar, and if you decide you don't want an auto tuner system, it's a lot easier to remove from the guitar. But the only issue you really get from it is if you try to strum all the strings at once, sometimes the sonic bleed or a harmonic from another string will confuse the guitar and potentially cause some strings to jump out of position. The best thing to do is to just go slowly from one string to the next string and allow the guitar to adjust them accordingly. And if you do the strings one at a time, it will normally tune very, very fast in significantly less time than you could do it yourself. Okay, so enabling the system, I see by that B flashing, that represents the tuning, which is a half a step down. I'm going to go to the E, which represents standard tuning, and immediately, being calibrated to this type of string, the guitar jumps into a rough tuning right away. It's actually fairly close now. And we'll take our guitar pick and strum each of the strings gently. I was unable to see the lights on the back, so I wasn't sure if it was done. It was done in one pass. So now that it's retuned, we can take a look at how accurate it is on the stroboscope. I think this is actually the quickest way to get from one tuning to another after you allow the guitar to calibrate itself by testing how far it has to turn to get how much of a pitch change out of your string, which will depend on what gauge strings you're using. It gives you the fastest result. Let's see how accurate that result is. Okay, so we're back with the 2015 Les Paul Deluxe with what Gibson calls the G-Force tuning system. It is the most recent system that I am aware of for tuning guitars. The strobo tuner is set to E, high E, extremely close, maybe possibly a little flat, low E, again very close, slightly flat. I'm seeing a trend here. That either means my tuner is whack, which I don't think so, or possibly it's intentional by design for a fretted instrument. D, very close, slightly flat. B. The B is absolutely stone dead on. A. Extremely close, slightly flat. And G. Actually, am I on the right one for G? Yeah, play the right string, silly. There's our G. Again, very close, slightly flat. So, looking at the different tuning systems, let me give this one more opportunity to touch itself up if it feels it's necessary. In giving the guitar an opportunity to adjust, it did make a few adjustments. See what it did to G? It actually brought the G up a little bit. It is almost dead on now. And this is just a matter of sitting for a few moments after being tuned. It's amazing how much wood moves. It did adjust the D and brought that up a little bit more. Almost dead on. And it did adjust the A, which is almost dead on. So I would say from system to system, the Generation 2 and the current G-Force system are definitely an improvement over the original robotic tuning system. The advantage to the G2 is that it listens at the bridge, so it doesn't get confused as to which strings you're playing, and that way it can more accurately tune in faster succession. If you were to play all the strings, it can listen to them separately. The advantage to the G-Force is, number one, that it immediately hops to a rough outline of any tuning you want, which is great. But the disadvantage could potentially be if you're tuning in a very, very noisy environment. If there is vibration in the guitar neck caused from, let's say, a subwoofer rattling the tar out of things, you could possibly mess it up. I haven't been in any situations where I was disappointed in any of these systems. But here's your question that I originally posed at the beginning. How accurate are Gibson self-tuning guitars? Pretty darn good. The Generation 1 was probably the least exciting, but the current production and the second generation, which would be what was seen on the Darkfire, Dusk Tiger, and Firebird X, that system is very, very good too. Are they in perfect tune? No, but are they in really darn close to perfect tune? Yes, they're very, very close. The stroboscopic tuner is significantly more sensitive than any digital tuner you would own. So, despite the fact that the stroboscope says these strings are a little flat, it's inaudibly different. I can only think of, actually I don't know anybody personally that could discern the difference between that minimal of a pitch change. So, if you ever wondered if the Gibson tuning system is worth it, if you like to experiment with different tuners, or tunings, like playing slide, or half a step down, this kind of thing is cool. If you wanted to retrofit another guitar, the company that makes them is called Tronical. I think you can buy them and have them shipped in from Germany, although in the US there's some kind of license thing that makes Gibson the only person who can stick them on guitars directly. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for watching. Have a great day, and happy days and accurate tuning to you all.